Good morning, you're listening to the brief wake up, your mindful start to the day. I'm Handel, your daily coffee companion, helping you wake up informed, thoughtful, and maybe just a little amused before the day gets old. If you're commuting, corralling kids, or just standing in line for caffeine, you're in the right place. Let's get you caught up. For our health, genes versus habits. What actually determines how long you live? For decades, longevity was framed as a debate. Is lifespan determined by genetics or by lifestyle? Large modern population studies are giving a clear answer. Roughly about half, around 55%, of lifespan variation appears tied to genetic background, while the rest is determined by environment and behavior. So DNA matters, but it doesn't fully decide outcome, especially the diseases that actually end life early. Because people rarely die of aging itself, they die of cardiovascular disease and cancer. And when researchers look at which behaviors most strongly change those risks, two exposures consistently dominate: smoking and alcohol. Not because they are trendy topics, but because biologically they act at the deepest level. They directly damage tissue and alter cellular repair. Smoking primarily works through cumulative injury. It accelerates atherosclerosis, destabilizes plaque, increases clotting tendency, and impairs oxygen delivery. That drives heart attack, stroke, and peripheral arterial disease. At the same time, tobacco massively increases mutation burden, which is why it's linked not just to lung cancer, but bladder, pancreas, kidney, colon, and several others. Alcohol works differently but intersects with the same outcomes. Chronic exposure raises blood pressure, promotes atrial fibrillation, weakens heart muscle, and contributes to metabolic disease, all cardiovascular pathways. Meanwhile, the body converts alcohol into acetaldehyde, a compound that directly damages DNA and interferes with repair mechanisms, increasing cancer risk, especially breast, liver, esophageal, and colon cancers. Here's where genetics comes back in. Genes often determine susceptibility, how well your body repairs damage or handles inflammation. But smoking and alcohol determine how much damage occurs in the first place. In other words, genetics influences vulnerability, lifestyle determines exposure. This explains why these two habits dominate longevity research. Many health interventions shift risk slightly. Smoking and heavy alcohol use shift the entire probability curve of cardiovascular disease and cancer, the two leading causes of premature death. So while about half of lifespan may be inherited, a large portion of early mortality still depends on repeated biological injury over decades. Longevity medicine is becoming increasingly high-tech. Biomarkers, aging clocks, personalized genomics. But the biggest levers remain remarkably simple. Reduce chronic exposure to substances that repeatedly damage cells. Because in the end, genes shape the terrain, but habits shape the outcome. The news is next. In the news, of course, the Super Bowl. Last night's Super Bowl wasn't really one event. It was 4 different broadcasts happening at the same time. First, the football. Seattle beat New England 29-13 in a game that never turned into the shootout people expected. The Seahawks controlled tempo from early in the second quarter onward. Pressure defense, field position, and a steady run game. By the fourth quarter, it felt less like a comeback waiting to happen, and more like a slow, tightening grip. Old school championship football. Limit mistakes, win territory, finish drives. But the game itself was only part of what people were watching. Bad Bunny headlined the halftime show, performing largely in Spanish and leaning fully into Puerto Rican imagery and Latin music styles. The message wasn't subtle. The NFL isn't marketing just to the United States anymore. It's marketing to the entire hemisphere. For some viewers, it felt inclusive and modern. For others, it felt political. At the same time, Turning Point USA streamed an alternative all-American halftime show aimed at a completely different audience. And that's the interesting part. For decades, Americans argued about the Super Bowl the next day, but they watched the same Super Bowl. Now, increasingly, people watch the version that reflects them, not different teams, different cultural broadcasts. And yet, despite all that fragmentation, advertisers still showed up. A 30-second ad cost roughly $8 million before celebrities or production. Some went emotional, like Lay's, which ran a heartfelt father-daughter farming story that became one of the night's most praised commercials. Others went nostalgia and humor. Duncan spoofed Good Will Hunting with Ben Affleck, while several brands packed their ads with movie casts and sitcom reunions. Then there were the tech ads, especially AI, flashy, expensive, and noticeably confusing, which may actually be the point. Companies aren't just selling products anymore. They're buying conversation. Because at the Super Bowl, the ad isn't meant to convince you. It's meant to make you talk today. Seattle won the football game, but the Super Bowl itself showed something bigger. One massive shared moment experienced through very different lenses. Sports, culture, politics, and advertising all on the same field, but no longer the same broadcast. The big sip is next. Continuing our Living with Absence Grief series. There's an uncomfortable truth about grief that people don't hear very often. Time alone does not heal every loss. For many people, grief gradually changes. The waves still come, but they spread out. Life begins to grow around the absence. But for some people, something different happens. The grief doesn't soften, it stays sharp, persistent, almost frozen in place. Psychology now recognizes this as a distinct condition called prolonged grief. This isn't weakness, it isn't a lack of resilience, and it isn't someone choosing not to move forward. It's what happens when the attachment system struggles to update its internal map of reality. Earlier in this series, we talked about how the brain predicts the world, who should be there, whose voice belongs in your day, whose presence is expected. Normally, over time, the brain slowly rewrites that model. In prolonged grief, that update stalls. The brain keeps searching. People often feel intense yearning that does not ease. A sense that life has permanently lost meaning. Avoidance of reminders, or sometimes the opposite, living entirely inside them. And a powerful feeling of being stuck at the moment the world changed. This is important. Prolonged grief is not the same as depression. Depression spreads across everything: mood, energy, interest, self-worth. Prolonged grief stays organized around one person. Life may still function, but the loss remains neurologically unresolved. And because the problem is specific, the treatment is specific. Research now shows there are therapies designed to help the brain gradually accept the permanence of the loss, while preserving the relationship internally, not erasing it, not forgetting it, but relocating it. In other words, helping the attachment system complete the update it couldn't complete alone. Needing that kind of help is not failure. Sometimes a bond is so central to your life that the nervous system can't recalibrate without guidance. Grief usually adapts with time. But when it doesn't, the answer isn't endurance. It's support matched to the size of the wound. Because healing doesn't always mean waiting longer. Sometimes it means helping the brain learn how to live in a world it never expected to exist. The lighter roast is next. A few years ago in Central Park, a man set up a small folding table and started selling spray paint canvases for about $60 each. People walked by all day. Some glanced, most ignored him. A few buyers stopped, negotiated the price down, and left happy with a cheap piece of street art. What they didn't know? The artist was Banksy. Original works, worth tens or hundreds of thousands, sold for the price of a sandwich. And even the people who bought them didn't think they had something special. Now imagine the same art appearing overnight on a brick wall with a headline. Banksy appears in New York. Crowds gather. Phones come out. Barriers go up to protect it. Same art, same skill, same artist, different context. We don't just react to reality, we react to the meaning assigned to reality. And we do this with people constantly. The quiet coworker seems cold until you learn they're overwhelmed. The short reply feels rude until you learn they haven't slept. The distant friend seems uncaring until you learn they're grieving. Nothing about the behavior changed, only the story did. Our brains are efficient. They fill gaps quickly, so the world makes sense. But speed trades accuracy for certainty, and we end up judging character when we're actually missing information. So today's reminder: before deciding what someone is, pause long enough to wonder what you don't know yet. Because sometimes the difference between ordinary and remarkable isn't the thing itself, it's the context you didn't have. And tomorrow, we'll talk about how to counter this instinct, including simple perspective-taking habits that make understanding people a little easier. Our commemoration is next. February 9th shows how influence comes in very different forms. In 1964, the Beatles appeared on The Ed Sullivan Show, and about 73 million Americans watched. Overnight, music, fashion, and youth culture changed, launching the British invasion and redefining what pop culture could be. Today is also the birthday of Alice Walker, whose novel The Color Purple reshaped modern American literature and expanded how stories about identity and resilience were told. And on this day, in 1773, William Henry Harrison was born, later becoming the U.S. president with the shortest term in history after dying just 32 days into office, a moment that permanently changed how seriously presidential health was considered. And finally, it's National Pizza Day. Proof that some cultural institutions don't need history books at all. From a television performance that changed music, to a novel that changed literature, to a presidency that changed policy, to a food that everyone agrees on. February 9th reminds us influence comes in many forms. Today we saw a common theme across health, culture, and even grief. Context shapes outcomes more than we think. Genes matter, events matter, loss matters, but how we respond to them often determines what they become in our lives. We'll see you tomorrow on The Brief Wake Up, where understanding a little more helps everything make a little more sense.